third image. I'm guessing most of you will recognize this. This is the start of Half-Life 2. Not the start, but very near the start. This image is really quite interesting to me because this whole sequence in Half-Life 2, you essentially make your way through a series of areas without ever really being told what to do and without ever needing to be told what to do. It's a fairly linear game, but it's not like we're bouncing off the walls in each section until we find the way out. Like, we clearly know here that where we're going is right through there. And if you can see, yeah, you probably can't, but you know, there's a ramp just through there, and the ramp immediately says to us, we're going up that ramp, you know. And it's funny because then you get saved by Alex at the start, and she says, I don't think it occurred to Dr. Kleiner that you didn't have a map. And of course the great irony is that you never needed a map at any stage of that game because it was leading you so well through these spaces. Alright, so I'll just go really quickly because I don't want to take up all the other panels' time as well, but there are other ways that games do this, not just in linear games. Theme parks have been using some of these methods for years. I'm sure you all know what this is, right? But this is a perfect design of a space in a theme park that's designed to guide you into an area. Wherever you are in Disneyland, you're always going to be able to see the castle. So it acts as what I think Walt Disney coined it a weenie. So that's an architectural point that you can see regardless of where you are, that you always know where the center of the theme park is. And games have been doing this for some time now. This is a great example. I'm sure I don't need to introduce what this is, but you can always pretty much see where Death Mountain is in Ocarina of Time, and therefore know where Hyrule Castle is. So you've always got that sort of center that's speaking to you and leading you. And of course, the best video game weenie of all time being the Halo ring, where you always know which way is forward, pretty much. I like to think of this as sort of turning the game Halo into sort of a hamster wheel, you know, sort of running always forward and not really caring about what came behind you. But, okay, so I'm probably talk too much, I just wanted to sort of put this to one of the panel questions that's in your guide today, and you know, to keep things on topic, which is what happens when we realize that the in-game space doesn't need to conform to physical laws. And I think the thing that most interests me is about this question is that it's not actually a very interesting question, because as you hopefully can see, that it's not necessarily the physical laws and the actual geometry of the space that's really worthwhile investigating, but instead is the use and the intended use of the space. And if we can create space that speaks, we can do so much more with video games. We can create excitement, awe, mastery, sadness, exhilaration, just simply through spatial design. So breaking the laws of physics just seems like such a small aim in comparison. So I'll leave it there.
Hey, today I'm just going to talk about an area of my sculptural practice, which was sort of developed maybe sort of 5 or 6 years ago, where it's called Analog Art Map, where I really started looking at particularly digital spaces and how they could be represented in analog ways, in real world ways. I was kind of interested with the sort of quite a large growth in virtual environments, things like Second Life and game engine environments, and even social spaces online, you know, Facebook and MySpace and that sort of thing. And just how, I suppose, quite similar to what Alex and Dan were talking about, this idea that physical space or digital space, it doesn't really need to replicate physical space. but it kind of does. It always does. You know, there's this relationship. I mean, we are physical beings. We live in a physical world. But that's not to suggest that when we're in digital space, we have to conform to those laws. And I guess my way of approaching that, very much from a real world sort of sculptural practice, was to consider different ways of thinking about space in the analogue world. And one of my ideas came about, which was, I suppose, a bit of a manifesto of thinking about space as media. So rather than thinking about digital space as being analogue, thinking about analogue space as having that potential to be digital. And it was sort of very much, you know, a sculptural, tactile practice. And I really wanted it to be a shared practice as well. I didn't want to be sort of dictating these ideas. It was very much like the digital realm about other people being involved in these sorts of environments. So I sort of had a bit of a look around at virtual spaces and things like this, which is a visualization of a Facebook page, and then the same sort of thing again. I sort of got my Facebook page, and this was one of the apps that was floating around a few years ago, where you could kind of visualize all of your kind of friendscape into this sort of environment. And I started thinking about how that could be represented in a physical space, and created this work called MapMe, where it really was just about creating a sort of physical architectural version of something like Facebook or MySpace. So literally set up these environments where people would go in and sort of find people that they knew and connect to them, like make a presence with a little business card or a photo of themselves or something like that, and then find other people that they knew and connect to them in that space. And sort of creating these quite architectural spaces, like really bringing the social network into a physical environment. It was quite interesting actually for a variety of reasons. One of them is the people have become quite at home in these virtual social spaces, and have developed their own kind of interactions in the way people would, of course, you know, we're all very familiar with physical social interactions like parties and that sort of thing. And these virtual ones, people come combining them and squashing them together, and, you know, actually poking each other in real space, which, you know, at the outset of Facebook, we thought poking was a really big thing, which actually got quite annoying in the real space. But and also just this sort of tactile dimension, which you really have in something like Facebook, where you can really sort of affect your profile, and then actually bringing that into a physical space, a tactile space, where people actually have to kind of handle texters and post-it notes and bits of wall and that kind of thing. It's interesting as well, I've exhibited this work in festivals all around the world, and a lot of them I didn't actually make it to myself. I could just sort of pack up like a whole lot of stationery and wool and the instructions, the instruction sheet I showed at the start of how to do it, and sent it around to festivals. And I had no way of recording it, but then I started searching on the name of MapMe and the project that I was doing, the larger project, Analog Art Map. And in Flickr, all of these photos of my works that sort of travelled around the world turned up, including these ones, which were from where it was presented at Conform Festival in New York in 2007, I think, which was kind of interesting. And I mean, this was what I was after, actually getting the this feedback loop of getting something which was digital and then making it physical and then having it reappear in the digital, and actually getting people to kind of think about space in that sort of way. I think yeah, Alex and Dan both kind of talked about that idea as well, of like, you know, really trying to rethink by kind of putting the digital into the physical and so on. Another work that I did around this time, as I say, this is sort of between 3 and 5 years ago, and I still do it here and there, but was actually looking at ways in which people map space. This was at a time when I suppose a lot of the Google kind of geo applications were really starting to appear, just a little bit before Street View, but very much kind of Google Maps, and the way people started thinking about space really changed with that digital that digital space coming to the fore, and of course the other one was Second Life. And in some ways Second Life was a real driving force for me because there was this essentially, you know, really a whole new planet that we could inhabit. It was just countries of empty space, and you could really do anything that you want. There are all these 3D engines that you could go in there and sort of mix it around and create your own spaces and create your own buildings and stuff. And what was so depressing and appalling is what the result was, which was like rows of shopping malls and poker machines and strip clubs and bad nightclubs and all this sort of, it was the worst of the physical space in the digital world. It was this, it was like looking at somebody else's photos of Vegas or something like that. It was quite depressing, and in some ways I suppose it was a little bit of a reaction to that sort of thing. And I did this work where I visited festivals around the world and would literally collect maps from people of places to go. So would say, go up to someone and say, you know, look, I'm in town for a few days, what's something which is worth checking out while I'm here? Is there a good view that I should see, or is there like a restaurant I should go to, or a nice cafe or whatever? And they would give me directions, and I'd say, oh, well, can you draw me a map? And they'd draw me a map, and I'd go to that location, sort of check it out, and while I was at that location, talk to somebody else and say, look, can you draw me a map to somewhere else to go to? I'm feeling a bit hungry, maybe a restaurant or whatever. And spend sort of 3 or 4 days collecting these maps and going to all the different locations. And then at the end of it all, you sort of have this kind of looped atlas, I suppose, of all these different people's impressions of the spaces in which they live. I don't actually have it here, I should have put it in there, but there's a lot of different things, like in this one, for example, you can really see the church, the Lithuanian church, Russian church, and how it's been represented on the map. And it's a real sort of, it's a real landmark. But there are some, like particularly going around Brooklyn, where all of these were based. It was part of Conflux Festival, which was held in Brooklyn at that time, the Psychogeography Festival. People would just draw a big line through maps that they would draw me and put BQE on it. And I had no idea what this was, but the BQE is the, so you probably know, it's the Brooklyn Queens Expressway. And it's just this highway which goes straight through the middle of you know, sort of urban suburbia of Brooklyn. And it's quite a thing to navigate because, of course, you know, being an above ground expressway, it's just this river of metal, essentially, which is really hard to get through. It's like the Westgate or something like that, cutting through this sort of urban suburban area, and so people would just orient themselves according to that. So, but of course, as a tourist there, I had no idea of what it was. It was very much local knowledge. So I collected quite a few of these maps, and was quite interested in just this sort of psychogeographic notion of space. And from there, I really just went into this practice of collecting hand-drawn maps, which I did for quite a while, and then connecting them to the real spaces, which also became a work which I presented around the world for a while. This is one of the versions of it, which is in Darwin, which is basically just getting a pre-cyclone tracing map of Darwin and then getting people to draw contemporary maps of how it related. There's similar work in Melbourne, an 1856 map of Melbourne, and then getting people to draw contemporary maps around it and sort of go, oh yeah, hang on, this doesn't work here, this map's a bit wrong. And just getting them to think about sort of the actual as the virtual, like, you know, a 150-year-old map as a kind of virtual space now, and that it doesn't actually exist anymore. And a lot of these maps started to turn up, and these directions I started to use in games, alternate reality games and location-based games and things. One other quick work that I'll just mention is a work called Tetris Town, where I created all these Tetris-shaped pieces and put little building blocks on them representing different things like housing estates or hospitals or supermarkets or churches or whatever. And then we'd get people, you get an idea of the scale there, to create city centres by moving these Tetris pieces around. Everyone sort of understands the Tetris jigsaw puzzle.